Huh? Fools. They never thought you'd make it out alive. They thought losing you would bring them peace. They thought walking away would give them power. But what they didn't realize was this: your absence was never neutral. It was never empty space. It was never silence. It was consequence disguised as distance. And the moment you stepped away, the world they built around themselves started trembling in ways they pretended not to notice. Because people like them only understand value when it's no longer standing beside them. They only understand warmth when they've spent enough nights shivering in the cold version of their own reflection. They only understand love when the last place they felt it stops taking their calls. You were the architecture. You were the unseen foundation holding up rooms they thought they built alone. And when you walked out, everything they thought was sturdy began to lean. Everything they swore was secure started cracking under the weight of their own ego. They called it freedom. They celebrated the space you left like a victory parade. But deep inside, something tugged, something pulled, something whispered. A voice they didn't want to hear but couldn't escape. What if that was the only real connection you ever had? What if you misread the blessing? What if you walked away from the one thing that kept your soul from collapsing? They brushed it off at first. They pretended they didn't feel it. They posted louder, laughed louder, performed confidence like a play. But performance has an expiration date, and when the spotlight dims and the masks slip, all that remains is the truth they tried to outrun. Your absence became their mirror, quiet but confrontational, still but unforgiving, reflecting every choice, every lie, every self-sabotaging move they once blamed on you, and suddenly the narrative they crafted, you were the problem, started dissolving in their hands like wet paper, because problems don't glow after you leave. Problems don't evolve. Problems don't rise higher. People do. Real ones do. You did. And that's what disturbs them now. Not that you're gone, but that you didn't fall apart after they left. That you didn't crumble in the vacuum they expected to swallow you whole. They thought they were your oxygen. They thought stepping away would suffocate your spirit. Instead, you inhaled deeper, cleaner, freer. You started breathing in a way they never imagined you could, because they never saw you clearly to begin with. They saw your kindness and mistook it for dependence. They saw your forgiveness and mistook it for weakness. They saw your loyalty and mistook it for naivety. They never recognized that strength doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it observes. Sometimes it walks away quietly, leaving storms behind for those who created them. And that storm is what they feel now. Not because you wished it, not because you caused it, but because absence reveals what presence concealed. They're finally meeting themselves without your cushioning energy, without your emotional first aid, without your quiet stability anchoring their chaos. And they don't like what they see. Because you were the peace they mistook for routine. You were the clarity they thought was coincidence. You were the grounding they dismissed as just how things are. But life without you taught them quickly, nothing is just how it was. You were the difference. You were the alignment. You were the part of their life that made everything else feel survivable. And losing that kind of presence is not a small thing. It's seismic, tectonic, a shift they can't ignore, but also can't admit. So now they sit in their new freedom, wondering why the world feels heavier, why conversations feel emptier, why victories don't taste the same, why their spirit feels unstable, restless, uncentered, because they were drawing from a well they thought was endless, unaware that wells run dry when disrespected. Meanwhile, your transformation didn't happen out of spite. It happened out of necessity, out of wisdom. Out of healing, You realized your spirit wasn't meant to shrink, so others could feel tall. You realized your peace wasn't meant to be traded for temporary affection. You realized your worth wasn't something to debate, it was something to embody, and embody it you did. Piece by piece you rebuilt yourself, not because they broke you, but because you outgrew the version of you that tolerated their chaos. Not because you needed revenge, but because you needed alignment. Not because you wanted them to regret, but because you wanted to remember who you were before you let the wrong people narrate your identity. And now that you're glowing in a truth they never expected you to discover, they're feeling the weight of a realization too heavy to admit. You weren't replaceable. You weren't temporary. You weren't optional. You were the stability they now crave but can't recreate. The energy they now seek but can't access. The calm their soul remembers but can't return to. But don't misunderstand, their regret isn't growth. It's recognition of what they lost, recognition of what they mishandled, recognition of the reality they refused to see when you were still soft enough to stay. You're not softer now. You're sharper, clearer, stronger. You no longer bend to fit the spaces they offered. You build your own. And the moment they realized this, their confidence started cracking because it was never confidence. It was comfort. A comfort built on the assumption that you'd always be there, always give more chances, always explain your heart to people who didn't even understand their own. But now, you don't explain, you don't defend, you don't repeat yourself. Your silence became your boundary, and your boundary became your power. This is what unsettles them most, not your growth, but your detachment, not your evolution, but your indifference. They can feel it in the way you no longer respond emotionally, in the way your presence now holds weight instead of worry, in the way your eyes no longer seek understanding. They reflect it. They reflect everything you learned from every wound they contributed to, and they reflect everything. They never thought you'd see clearly. Your glow isn't revenge, it's recovery. Your peace isn't punishment, it's proof. Proof that you were never the chaos. They were proof that you were never the burden. They were proof that you were never asking for too much. They were offering too little. And now the contrast is undeniable, because the world you're building reflects gratitude. The world they're living reflects memory. You move with intention. They move with regret. You build from wholeness. They rebuild from echoes. You rise because of growth, they fall because of realization. And realization is a quiet teacher, but it's a brutal one. It whispers reminders where no one can see. It plays flashbacks like films behind the eyes. It teaches by showing what could have been if only they had treated you differently. Their life now holds a before, you and an after. You and the after. You feels colder, duller, less alive, because your energy wasn't something they experienced often. It was rare, sacred, a frequency that doesn't repeat for those who mishandle it. And the universe makes sure of that, not out of punishment, but out of preservation. Your preservation, because your journey isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about honoring the parts of you that survived what was meant to silence them. It's about becoming the person you needed when you were breaking, and you did quietly, thoroughly, beautifully. And as your life expands, new peace, new paths, new alignment. They watch from afar, unable to participate in what they once took for granted. And that distance it teaches. It heals. It exposes. It transforms. Not them. You learned what connection should feel like. You learned what self-respect tastes like. You learned how powerful silence becomes when you stop using it to protect others and start using it to protect yourself. You learned that some people don't lose you. They lose access to you, and access once revoked becomes a lesson they relive every day. Your presence was a privilege. Your departure became the proof. And this is only the beginning. But let's go deeper, because their unraveling didn't begin the day you left. It began the day you started changing. The day your eyes stopped seeking validation. The day your voice steadied. The day you stopped responding to chaos with explanation and started responding with silence. They felt that shift like a temperature drop. They couldn't articulate it, but they sensed it. Something in you was recalibrating, pulling back, pulling inward, pulling higher, and that terrified them long before you actually walked away. Because losing someone physically hurts, but losing someone emotionally before they ever say a word, that's haunting. They saw it in your posture, in your questions, in the way your smile slowly stopped reaching your eyes. They felt the distance forming, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because your spirit was beginning to detach from a space that no longer aligned with your evolution. Your energy started rejecting what your heart once tolerated, and no matter how much they tried to pretend things were the same, they weren't. They were watching you slip out of the version of yourself they had control over and into the one that didn't need them anymore. That shift, that silent evolution, is what scared them more than your departure. Because departure is an event. Growth is a warning, they thought. They'd have more time. Time to manipulate. Time to guilt, trip. Time to minimize your feelings until you doubted yourself enough to stay. They thought if they ignored your pain long enough, your loyalty would override your self-worth. They thought you'd keep shrinking to fit the space they allowed you. But you changed the script. You stepped out of the role they wrote for you, and in doing so, you shattered the story they comforted themselves with. You see, the most powerful moment in any transformation is not when you rise. It's when you stop shrinking, when you stop apologizing for your needs, when you stop accepting the bare minimum, when you stop confusing attachment with love. That moment is the silent revolution that turns your entire destiny in a different direction. And once you crossed that threshold, nothing could pull you back. But they tried anyway, not because they valued you, but because they valued the version of themselves they were when they had access to your energy. They liked who they were when they were next to you. Whole, supported, stable. They just didn't want to do the work required to keep earning that kind of presence. They wanted the benefits of your light, while investing nothing in the maintenance of their own. That's why losing you feels like losing oxygen, because you were the emotional ventilation system for their dysfunction, quietly filtering their chaos, grounding their instability, translating their confusion into clarity. They mistook your emotional labor for personality. They thought you were just like that. But now, stripped of your energy, they're forced to face themselves raw, unfiltered, unsoftened, and the person they meet in your absence is someone they barely recognize. Impatient, insecure, restless, easily triggered, emotionally scattered, all the traits you balanced out just by existing. Your absence didn't make them worse. It revealed what was always there, just hidden under the cushion of your presence. And that revelation is an uncomfortable one, because now they can't blame you. They can only blame themselves. That's where regret begins, quietly, subtly, like a cough that starts innocent but lingers. They start replaying conversations they dismissed, moments where you tried to express your needs, times when you asked for clarity, honesty, consistency, and they rolled their eyes, changed the subject, or turned defensive. They remember every moment you tried, and every moment they didn't. Regret is loudest in hindsight, and hindsight became their new reality. But regret alone isn't what haunts them. It's the contrast, because while their world is dimming, yours is brightening. While their life feels heavier, yours feels lighter. While they're stuck recycling old habits with new faces, you're breaking cycles altogether. Your growth exposes their stagnation, Your peace exposes their unrest. Your progress exposes their patterns. You're not trying to overshadow them. Your evolution simply illuminates everything they refuse to evolve beyond. And nothing pierces a person more deeply than witnessing someone they underestimated become everything they feared you would. Not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. That's why your glow feels threatening to them. Not because you're attacking, but because your existence challenges their excuses. They used to believe you'd crumble without them. Now they're realizing you were the one doing the holding. They used to believe you'd miss them forever. Now they're realizing it was their ego, not your heart, that needed attachment. They used to believe you weren't strong enough to walk away. Now they watch you living in a peace they can't recreate. And the irony is delicious. They didn't lose you. They lost access to the version of themselves that existed only in your light. But let's talk about the guilt. Not the guilt they admit, the guilt they hide, the guilt they suffocate under fake confidence. The guilt that appears when the world gets quiet. It visits them at night, when their mind has no distractions left to cling to. It whispers in the spaces between their thoughts. It reminds them of how they treated someone who loved them without conditions. It shows them the reflection of every moment they chose pride over partnership, ego over empathy, silence over effort. It forces them to face the truth. You weren't asking for too much. They were offering too little, and now the too little is all they have left. They scroll through old messages, pretending they're just curious, but they're not curious. They're grieving the loss of a connection they never thought they'd lose, grieving the version of themselves they were with you, grieving the future that slipped through their fingers because they didn't know how to hold it. And when they see you now, calmer, clearer, stronger, it stings, not because you've changed, but because they didn't grow with you. You evolved into a version of yourself they no longer have access to. And that version is someone they can't replicate, replace, or rewrite. You became untouchable, not because you put up walls, but because your elevation lifted you to a frequency they can't reach without doing the work. And they're not ready for the work. They weren't ready then. They're not ready now, and the universe keeps receipts. Your detachment isn't punishment, it's protection. You're not blocking them out. You're blocking out the version of yourself that tolerated what your healed self would never accept. You didn't become cold, you became clear. You didn't become distant, you became aligned. You didn't become selfish, you became self-aware. And that self-awareness is what shifted the entire storyline. Because for the first time, you realize that love isn't proven by how much pain you endure for someone. Love is proven by how you treat yourself when they fail to meet you with respect. You chose yourself, and that choice became their consequence. And while they scramble to find pieces of themselves in temporary distractions, you're building a future anchored in purpose, intention, and authenticity. A future that doesn't require anyone to complete you because you finally realized you were never incomplete. A future where your peace is protected, your worth is non-negotiable, and your boundaries are sacred. You didn't rise to hurt them. You rose to heal yourself. Their pain is simply the echo of their own actions returning home. That's what they never understood. Your healing was never revenge. It was revelation, and that revelation exposed everything they weren't ready to face. You weren't the storm. You were the shelter. And they walked out thinking the world outside would treat them better. Now they stand in the rain, drenched in the consequences of their own choices, searching for shelter in places that will never hold them the way you did. And no matter where they go, no matter who they meet, no matter what they chase, they'll always feel the absence of the one thing they never honored when they had it. A pure connection, a steady presence, a soul that loved without agenda. But this isn't your ending. This isn't even your climax. This is your rise. And they know it, which is why they watch you. Not out of malice, but out of mourning. Mourning the version of themselves they lost when they lost you. Mourning the life they could have built but abandoned. Mourning the peace they once felt but never valued. They didn't just lose you. They lost the only version of themselves that was whole, and you. You're just getting started.